What if I told you the Hodge twins admitted with their own words that it's never been about helping the black community, it's all about pandering and getting paid? Today, I'm gonna show you the clip that exposes everything. The HodgeTwins, widely recognized as the conservative twins, have carved out a sizable presence in the digital media world, amassing millions of subscribers across their platforms. Their brand is instantly recognizable: identical twin brothers delivering sharp, often sarcastic commentary on cultural and political issues. Over the past 6 to 7 years, they've steadily aligned themselves with right-wing ideology, presenting themselves not just as entertainers but as outspoken voices in the conservative movement. Much of their content revolves around social issues in the black community, a focus that has both earned them popularity and subjected them to sharp criticism. Their formula is straightforward: reaction videos, short clips, and podcasts where they weigh in on trending headlines or social debates. While these formats are undeniably effective in today's fast-moving media ecosystem, critics argue that the content is shallow and repetitive, rarely venturing into new ideas or original insights. The twins have essentially found a template that works for their base and they repeat it over and over again. For their fans, this predictability is a strength. They know exactly what kind of commentary they'll get. For detractors, however, it's evidence of creative stagnation, a refusal to innovate beyond the safe, easy route of reactive content, and this raises a broader question about online influence. When a creator discovers that outrage, culture war hot takes, and audience pandering pay the bills, what incentive is there to push boundaries or evolve? The criticism often leveled against the HodgeTwins is that they've slipped into what many call grift content. A grift in this sense doesn't necessarily mean dishonesty. Rather, it refers to the practice of consistently producing material tailored to what the audience already believes, instead of offering fresh ideas or nuanced perspectives. Once a creator commits to this cycle, reinvention becomes risky. Growth requires challenge, but challenge might alienate the very people who provide views, clicks, and revenue. The twins, however, reject this framing. They argue that their perspectives are authentic, rooted in lived experience, and consistent with their long-standing political identity. Before they became household names on YouTube, both had already identified as Republicans. To them, this background proves that their current success isn't opportunistic. They maintain that their commentary isn't crafted to manipulate, but rather to express convictions they've held for years. In their eyes, the accusation of pandering misses the mark. They see themselves as truth-tellers, willing to say hard things others are afraid to say. Still, not everyone is convinced. The YouTube duo, ABA and Preach, known for their balanced yet sharp social critiques, have taken direct aim at the HodgeTwins. In one particularly pointed video, ABA and Preach argued that the twins' content amounts to little more than disdain for black people. Dressed up as political commentary, they accused the HodgeTwins of positioning themselves as voices of reason, while, in reality, reinforcing negative stereotypes about their own community for the consumption of largely white audiences. According to this view, the twins' success is less about courage and more about catering to a demographic that enjoys hearing criticisms of black culture from black commentators. This critique highlights a tension that has long existed in media: the dynamic between representation and exploitation. On one hand, having black conservatives voicing right-leaning views provides diversity within political discourse. On the other hand, if those voices focus disproportionately on criticizing black communities, while ignoring or excusing similar problems in white communities, they risk serving as instruments of validation for existing biases. In other words, it's not simply what is being said, but who is saying it, and to whom the message is directed, that shapes perception. The HodgeTwins defenders argue that such criticism is unfair. They claim the brothers are merely offering tough love, confronting hard truths that many within the community are reluctant to address. According to this perspective, their blunt delivery might feel harsh, but it reflects a genuine desire to encourage self-reflection and accountability. To these supporters, dismissing the twins as grifters ignores the value of personal responsibility in addressing systemic and cultural issues. Yet critics counter that if tough love is the goal, the execution falls short. Tough love involves guidance, investment, and a balance between critique and encouragement. What the HodgeTwins deliver, detractors argue, is closer to ridicule mocking failures and amplifying dysfunction without offering tangible solutions. Moreover, the selectivity of their focus raises red flags. When crimes or dysfunction occur in white conservative spaces, the twins rarely address them with the same energy. The silence suggests not neutrality, but a calculated decision to avoid alienating their primary audience. The accusations of pandering gain further weight when examining the broader ecosystem of conservative media. Black conservative voices often face a unique challenge. They are simultaneously uplifted by white audiences, eager to hear criticisms of Black culture, and scrutinized by Black audiences wary of betrayal. This creates a precarious balancing act. For the HodgeTwins, critics argue, the scales have tipped too heavily in favor of appeasing the former. Their jokes, commentary, and reactions often punch down on their own community while punching sideways or not at all when it comes to white conservatism. This imbalance isn't just a matter of optics. It has real consequences by reinforcing negative narratives about Black communities without contextualizing systemic inequalities or highlighting positive stories. Their content risks painting an incomplete and damaging picture. It's one thing to acknowledge problems like crime, family breakdown, or lack of accountability. It's another to frame those problems as cultural failings without addressing broader social and historical contexts. The Twins' critics argue that this one-sided approach doesn't just fail to uplift, it actively feeds stereotypes that harm. Of course, none of this is to say that the HodgeTwins lack talent or charisma. Their comedic timing, banter, and twin dynamic give them a natural stage presence that resonates with audiences. They know how to entertain, and in the attention economy, that skill is invaluable. Their rise is a testament to the power of personality-driven media. But charisma doesn't absolve responsibility. When influence reaches millions, the responsibility to balance critique with fairness becomes even more pressing. To return to the point made by ABA and Preach, the issue isn't whether the HodgeTwins genuinely believe what they say. It's whether their content, regardless of intention, functions as a form of pandering to an audience that delights in hearing harsh judgments about Black communities while being shielded from comparable critiques of white conservatives. If that's the case, then authenticity becomes less relevant than impact. Sincerity doesn't erase the consequences of perpetuating narratives that ultimately serve those outside the community more than those within it. In the end, the debate around the HodgeTwins isn't just about it's about the broader dynamics of digital media, identity, and ideology. It's about how content creators navigate the tension between audience demand and personal conviction, and how marginalized voices are sometimes co-opted into reinforcing the very systems they claim to critique. For some, the HodgeTwins are courageous truth-tellers. For others, they are opportunistic performers, cashing in on division. The truth may lie somewhere in between, but one thing is clear. Their rise illustrates both the power and the pitfalls of platform-driven politics in the digital age.
Just because I have different opinions don't mean I sold out. Yeah. A sellout is a person who says something for money. Yeah. I'm saying things because that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's how we see the world.
Yeah, I've monetized my opinion, but it's nothing wrong with that.
In the clip, one of the HodgeTwins takes a moment to push back against a common accusation that has followed them throughout their career. Looking directly at the camera, he insists, "I'm not a sellout. My opinions are real." For him, this is more than just a defensive statement, it's an assertion of authenticity, a declaration that his content and worldview are not driven by opportunism but by deeply held beliefs. He doubles down by describing himself as a capitalist, making it clear that earning money from his platform is not something he hides from or feels ashamed about. In fact, he frames it as part of his identity, a natural extension of his worldview. In his telling, monetization isn't a betrayal of principle, it's proof of principle in action. This emphasis on capitalism is telling. Within the conservative framework the Twins often espouse, capitalism is not just an economic system but a moral one. Success in the marketplace, whether in business or in media, is interpreted as validation of one's values and hard work. By claiming capitalism openly, the brother isn't merely saying he gets paid for his videos, he's reframing criticism into a badge of honor. If people accuse him of profiting from his content, he can respond, "Exactly on. That's what makes me authentic. I've earned it." But this defense is complicated by the broader perceptions surrounding the Twins. Detractors often argue that their content is less about conviction and more about strategy. To them, insisting "I'm not a sellout" only raises the question, why do so many people suspect otherwise? The accusation doesn't come from thin air. It stems from the patterns of their commentary, which consistently skews toward critiques of the Black community. while rarely extending equal scrutiny to white conservatives, despite the latter also being vulnerable to corruption, crime, and dysfunction. To critics, this selective focus looks less like principle and more like pandering. The HodgeTwins, however, root their defense in their political history. Long before they became internet personalities, they identified as Republicans. This detail matters, at least to their argument, because it suggests continuity. Their current success, they claim, is not the result of a sudden pivot toward conservatism for financial gain. Instead, it is the natural extension of who they've always been, by presenting themselves as lifelong Republicans. They aim to counter the narrative that their rise on YouTube is a calculated attempt to exploit the conservative marketplace. From their perspective, the timeline itself proves their sincerity. Here's where the debate becomes particularly nuanced. On one hand, sincerity and long-term belief systems matter. If someone has held the same positions for decades, it does add credibility to the argument that they are not opportunists. On the other hand, belief does not automatically shield one from critique. One can sincerely hold views that still function in practice as pandering, even if the intent is otherwise. What matters is not just authenticity, but also how that authenticity manifests in the public sphere. This is precisely why the HodgeTwins remain polarizing. To their fans, their refusal to waver under criticism is evidence of integrity. They don't bow to cancel culture, and they don't water down their message to win approval from mainstream audiences. Their capitalist framing also appeals to viewers who see financial success as proof of merit. In this reading, the twins are unapologetically themselves, Black conservatives who refuse to conform to progressive expectations. For their supporters, calling them sellouts is not only inaccurate but insulting, erasing the possibility of genuine ideological diversity within the Black community. For their critics, however, the defense rings hollow. They argue that capitalism alone doesn't justify what kind of narratives get amplified. Making money may validate business acumen, but it doesn't guarantee integrity. Slave traders, exploitative landlords, and propagandists also made money. Profit alone doesn't sanctify the content. So when the twins emphasize their capitalist ethos, it can sound less like authenticity and more like an excuse. I profit from this, so it must be real. Critics ask a different question: profit for whom, and at whose expense? If the financial success comes largely from reinforcing stereotypes and validating prejudices, then the capitalist defense does little to address the ethical concerns. This tension points to a larger conversation about what authenticity means in the digital age. With platforms like YouTube, creators are constantly balancing their own perspectives against audience expectations. The algorithm rewards consistency, outrage, and clear ideological branding. Once an audience is established, deviation becomes risky. Viewers who subscribe for one kind of content don't always appreciate sudden shifts in tone or focus. This creates a cycle where even authentic creators can feel pressured to lean into their most profitable themes. For the HodgeTwins, this dynamic means that even if their Republican identity predates their YouTube fame, their current content is inevitably shaped by the demands of their conservative base. And this is where the revealing comment mentioned in the clip comes into play. It reflects a subtle but crucial truth: acknowledgement of capitalism and long-standing conservatism may explain why the twins hold their views, but it doesn't erase the implications of how those views are performed for an audience. The authenticity defense only addresses motive, not outcome. You can believe in something sincerely and still end up packaging it in ways that disproportionately benefit a certain demographic while harming another. Consider how their critics, such as ABA and Preach, frame the issue. For them, the problem is not that the twins are conservative per se, it's that their content disproportionately criticizes Black people, often in exaggerated or mocking ways, while failing to highlight comparable problems among whites. To many viewers, this feels like betrayal. Using one's platform not to uplift but to confirm the biases of an audience that enjoys watching. Black commentators keep their own people in check. This perception, more than anything, fuels the sellout accusation. But here's where the HodgeTwins' defense becomes more layered. By rejecting the sellout label, they're not only defending themselves from charges of opportunism, they're also pushing back against the idea that Black conservatives are inherently traitors to their community. For decades, Black public figures who adopted conservative stances have faced this kind of suspicion. The twins position themselves as part of that tradition, arguing that they shouldn't be accused of betrayal simply because their views differ from the majority of Black Americans. In this sense, their insistence that their opinions are real is also a claim to legitimacy within the broader spectrum of Black political identity. Still, even within this framework, their approach raises questions about balance, responsibility, and consistency. If one positions oneself as a truth teller, then truth-telling should extend in all directions, not just toward one's own community. Otherwise, what's framed as honesty starts to resemble performance and act tailored for the consumption of those outside the group. The clip, then, encapsulates the central paradox of the HodgeTwins brand. They want to be seen as authentic, lifelong conservatives who are unafraid to speak uncomfortable truths. They frame their monetization not as exploitation but as a natural outcome of their capitalist philosophy. And yet, the very way their content is consumed, interpreted, and rewarded complicates this narrative. Authenticity may be their claim, but the optics what critics see as selective criticism and calculated silence continue to fuel doubts. Ultimately, the moment reveals how fragile the concept of authenticity has become in the age of online influence. For the HodgeTwins, insisting "I'm not a sellout" may well be sincere, but sincerity doesn't end the conversation, it only shifts it. The real question becomes whether their brand of authenticity uplifts, exploits, or panders. And that question is one their critics, and perhaps even their supporters, will continue to wrestle with as long as the twins remain fixtures in the online conservative space.
You know what, but I'm not anti-black.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm anti-black. I'm hard on black people.
Yeah.
Y'all need some criticism.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And, I am prejudiced, but everybody's prejudiced.
Yeah.
I just put my prejudice out there because I want black people to do better. We can do better.
Yeah. It's not wrong when having a bias or being prejudiced. It's only wrong when you use your biases and your prejudices to discriminate against people.
Belittle people, denigrate them. I'm not denigrating people simply because of the color of their skin.
Yeah.
I'm denigrating these people because of the way they behave.
In one moment, one of the HodgeTwins openly admitted something striking. He acknowledged having prejudices, particularly against black people, and justified it by saying tough criticism was needed for the community to improve. His argument was that these views weren't rooted in malice but in a belief that accountability would spark growth. Yet this stance immediately raises questions. If genuine improvement is the goal, where is the evidence of active efforts to uplift? Simply pointing out flaws while admitting bias doesn't equate to building solutions. What makes this even more complex is that both brothers are black themselves, married to Hispanic partners, and still frame their critiques in ways that appear more aligned with pandering to a white conservative audience than with nurturing black progress. At one point, a supporter named KT shared a clip that shed more light. In it, the twins candidly admit to tailoring their content for their base right-leaning middle-class audiences. They describe it as pandering, even joking that it's just a way to pay the bills. The admission strips away any pretense of tough love and highlights a calculated strategy: keep the base comfortable, never rock the boat too much, and secure the paycheck. This revelation is especially telling when compared to other creators. ABA and Preach, for instance, often challenge their own audiences and refuse to play it safe, even when it risks backlash. Comedians like Corey Holcomb or commentators like Tariq Nasheed share that willingness to stand apart, placing authenticity over appease. By contrast, the HodgeTwins' selective commentary reveals a different priority. They shine a spotlight on dysfunction within black communities but rarely critique wrongdoing among white conservatives. When white Republicans commit violence or scandals erupt, their silence is noticeable. Their critiques only seem to surface when it aligns with reinforcing their audience's worldview. That's not fearless honesty, it's pandering. To be clear, no one denies that problems exist in Black America. Violence, accountability issues, and systemic challenges are real, and calling them out can be necessary. But the hypocrisy lies in pretending this focus stems from a genuine desire to uplift, when in reality, dysfunction provides them with profitable content. The claim of tough love rings hollow when the only goal is to reinforce stereotypes that please an audience outside the community. If black people genuinely improved overnight, the very foundation of their content would crumble. Ultimately, the twins' approach does more to exploit than to empower. Their critiques may sound like guidance, but they serve a different function, keeping their audience entertained and comfortable, while distancing themselves from the very community they claim to critique out of love. And here's the irony: they assume their audience separates them from the stereotypes they spotlight. But too many, they remain part of the same collective they disparage. At the end of the day, their content benefits from black dysfunction, not black progress. That's the uncomfortable truth hiding beneath the banner of tough love.